Welcome back to Meticulously Ridiculous on StudiOU Voice of OU. I'm your host Jason. I want to welcome you back to our next segment here. If you were here for the first segment, you know that this week's topic is time. That's a very broad subject, but I think there's a lot to dive into there with that. So now we're going to transition. We talked about in the first part of today's show about longest and shortest times, time being subjective and how long, some things feel like they take and other things you blink and they're gone or you've missed them, that kind of thing. But now we're going to be delving into some memories, some of my memories, and maybe some of you could envision yourself and remember some of these things along with me, because as we get older, time seems to speed up, and you're kind of maybe longing for things that maybe once were, or of course everything seems to come back around again. I know I'm seeing a lot of things, research now that used to be popular when I was a teenager and things like that, and I'm seeing it again, and I'm like, my Lord, things do come back around, which is awesome. I mean, some things should probably stay in the past, as we know. It seems like every other month a reboot or remake of a favorite movie or what have you, is being made for no other reason, I'm sure than making money. People weren't necessarily clamoring for reinvention of their favorite things, but as we know, the business has to make some money, of course. So now I think this is something that they still have, but I was thinking about this the other day. I saw a reminder of this. I had been I've kind of, as I've gotten older, gotten out of reading. I've always really enjoyed reading, and I've kind of feel like I get bogged down with school and work and a lot of other extra things. But I do have always enjoyed reading, and I was thinking the other day about something that I used to partake in when I was in elementary school. And I feel like they still have this. I think that they still do, but I don't know how many of you remember the Book It program at their elementary. I don't think they went to the middle school level, but I believe that they did do certainly on the elementary school, because that's when I participated. But basically, like you would read books from a list. You would have this large pen that you could wear around. You could wear around school or anywhere else, of course, pin it on your clothes or your backpack, and you would read books from a certain list. And you would gain stickers. You had to have special stickers because you could not just put anything on there. But you would place stickers on your pen for earning for reading, and basically you could earn a free personal pan pizza from Pizza Hut. And I remember how awesome that made me feel, and I probably need to get back into that. Maybe we should institute that for adults that have gotten out of reading, or maybe if we actually sat and read our school text, maybe we should get we're getting a degree. Okay, I guess that's maybe our reward now. But I would certainly some days take a personal pan pizza over maybe some of the headaches that I typically have when it comes to some of my schoolwork. But I don't know how many of you remember Book It, and I hope that they still have that. I think that's a great way to give an incentive to read, because reading is really cool. And of course there are some really good books out there. Now, this is one I've had conversations with about several others with, and some remember them, some are think that I'm crazy and that I've made this up, that these did not exist. But I had saw an old ad the other day for the delectable and delightful afternoon snack called Dunkaroos. You may have heard that, probably not in conversation typically, because I don't think that's necessarily a topic that's regularly coming up. But Dunkaroos, for those of you who are unfamiliar, they were one of the best after-school snacks, or even to put in your school lunch. They were a little pocket. They were a little plastic thing, pocket of little cookies, little probably, maybe graham cracker style cookies, or they were shaped, like funny cartoon animals, whatever. But then you would open up the second pocket. That was the money right there. That was the icing pocket. So basically, Dunkaroos, you would take these little crackers, the cookies, and dip them into that amazing icing. I was thinking about that the other day. I was like, why in the world? Now, we have so many other brands of things now, and probably something very similar, but I remember how fondly when Mom would buy those for me, I remember how excited I would be to either take those with me for school lunch, or just, once I got back from school, probably jumping in there. So also reminiscing about this is a show that actually, it was just announced this past week, is going to be returning to TV, with one of the original cast members being the executive producer on this show. And actually, he's the current longest running cast member on Saturday Night Live, of course talking about Kenan Thompson. He has announced that he will be executive producing the return of the teen skit show, All That. That will be brought back, I'm guessing, in probably the next year, maybe even this year. I'm not sure what the time frame is. But again, remembering fondly, All That and the different things that spawned from that show, and Pierre Escargot, which was one of Kenan's, or one of my favorite of his characters, where he's in the bathtub, supposedly speaking French, and saying some silly things. But yes, All That will be returning to TV pretty soon. So I'm excited for that. Again, I get very nostalgic, and I start like thinking about things, and then of course you think about one thing, and then that leads to other things. So thinking about All That, watching that on Saturday nights got me thinking of other things, kind of comfort shows that I used to watch mainly in the afternoons. I remember when my mom and I, when we first got cable television, one of the absolute hands down most fun shows that could possibly be on TV, and I believe that at least some of the seasons are available now on Amazon Video, maybe other forms of streaming as well, but I have seen them on Amazon Video. Of course, I am talking about Supermarket Sweep. For those of you who do not know what this show is, do some research. This show was it. You would have three teams of couples, or three two-person teams. It doesn't matter the relation; they would be different relations. But basically, they would answer questions about supermarket things, and then the very end, they would run through the supermarket and fill up their baskets with as much stuff as possible, obviously always going for the meat and the baby products and et cetera, and things would go haywire. They would inevitably run into other teams with their basket, and things would just go wacky and everything else. But I remember so fondly, I guess because that was one of the first shows I remember seeing when in the afternoons when we first got cable, that was very, very delightful. So I recommend, if you have not seen that show, it's going to seem so dated, and it is, but it's a whole lot of fun. And it's funny to see how people answer supermarket questions and things about food and stuff like that. So and then of course now we have entertainment and movies and TV and so many things at our fingertips at all times. We are able to access basically anything that we want. We have on-demand cable, we have Netflix and Hulu, and et cetera, iTunes, of course. But I was remembering the other day about how awesome it was, because now it's not maybe quite as special because you can do it anytime and any day of the week, but how awesome it was for picking a movie out for a Friday night. Friday night was just movie night. So actually going to a store to rent a DVD to, and being obviously disappointed if they were out of stock or anything like that. But spending like maybe an hour in a store like that, trying to pick the perfect movie for a Friday night, because Friday night was movie nights. So that was certainly something that, I think I remember fondly, and probably a lot of us do, maybe having friends over or just watching it with your parents, that kind of thing. But, maybe you were given the power 1 week to pick out, what was going to be watched, and that was your special Friday night. To go along maybe with your Book It personal pan pizza. We'll tie all that together there. So I thought that was certainly something. Now, I was also, when I was younger, I was never any good, but I was a Little League baseball player. And the other day I was in the store, and I was happy to see and amazed to see that they still sold Big League Chew. This is something that has been around for many, many, many years, and it is in a pouch, and they tried to make it seem like you were dipping tobacco or chewing tobacco, but in bubblegum form. If you're unfamiliar, it's basically strings of bubblegum that are in this pouch, and you're supposed to just grab a pinch and put it in your cheek, just like chewing tobacco. But I saw this in the store the other day, and I was like, I cannot believe that is still around. They still make that. But I was remembering how awesome it was to take an entire pouch, and we were talking about a fairly sizable pouch, and putting the entire contents of that pouch in my mouth at a time. And I know fellow baseball players and just friends in general would do the same thing, because we would try to see how much we could fit in our mouths, and it was just, I was reminiscing fondly about, maybe not reminiscing so fondly about the jaw ache that inevitably caused, because obviously trying to chew that much bubble gum at a time does not end very well. And then right next to the Big League, and this is, I knew that they still sold this, but you don't think about things sometimes until you see them. And so this was something that I was very, it made me smile to see. They had some Valentine's ones out, and so they probably sell it regularly at other times as well. But Fun Dip, okay, now we're talking about crack for all of us here. That Fun Dip was where you have little sugar sticks and you have powder, basically a Kool-Aid type powder of varying flavors. And I just remembered basically most of the time discarding the powder and going right for the sugar sticks, especially if you got one of the longer sleeves. You got 2 sugar sticks and 2 different flavors of powder. But I remember sometimes, or maybe taking one little dip of powder and then being like, you know what, this sugar stick can't possibly last, so we're going to go right for that. And then let's sidebar to some more candy. I'm all about, I must be hungry this morning because I'm all about the food. But this is another debate that I have had here recently. It's about Starburst. And I think most of us would probably say what the best flavors are, the red and the pink, or in my estimation, the pink and then everything else. But the pink and the red are typically, and then in fact now I think it probably goes to show they even sell sleeves of Starburst that are just the reds. So they just have pink and red in those particular sleeves, and don't bog it down with the other flavors. But I remember holding on to the pink and the red, maybe for me, maybe for maybe a significant other along the way, that kind of thing. Special, got to treat them right, of course. But I remember always giving away the oranges and the yellows. You're not going to eat those. But I had a conversation just this last week that really it made me laugh, because they were so adamant that the yellow ones were the best ones, that they were like, I don't know, Jason, what you're talking about, because the yellow ones are the best. I will eat all of those, and you can have the others. And I'm like, that's fine. Give me the others. That's completely fine. If you want the yellows, you are by all means welcome to have them. But I just thought it was so funny that she was so adamant about that. And then one of my last memories for this part of the show, again at the store, and I like to go down the games aisle because I love board games and card games and things like that. Always have, and probably always will. I may transition into other games as I get older, maybe shuffleboard or that kind of thing. I don't know. That's not a board game, but I saw the games of Sorry and Trouble. Well, Sorry, as we know, can get pretty heated sometimes because you are, well, I guess, you know what, thinking about it, Trouble is the same way, because you can knock a player off the board by landing on an opposing person's player. So you can knock them back to a home base or off the board, etc. And I remember how heated sometimes these games would be because it's people just take it personally. It is just a game. A lot of us do get pretty competitive, and I do understand that. But I was remembering, I guess fondly, maybe sometimes not so fondly, but how funny it was where people would you would knock their player off, or maybe you were the one getting knocked off, and you would lose your mind because, and of course, then they would say sorry, all condescending like, and of course, you don't say sorry unless you mean it. I mean, I don't think we should anyway, but in that game, you have to say sorry. But then they're so condescending about it and everything else. So, but those are just a few of my memories. Hopefully, maybe you heard a few of yours in there as well. Be like, man, I did that too. So I'm going to let you go with some music right now. We'll be coming up in a little bit. We're going to continue on the movies. Onto movies here, movie memories, some movie scenes that just get me every time. I will, no matter how much time passes, so because we're all on the topic of time today, how much time passes, that these particular scenes just know how to get me every time. I will either get chill bumps, I will cry, I will admit it, I'm a softie, but or just invigorate me and give me power, like I'm just going to go out and conquer the world. But I'll be coming back here in a few after a little bit of music, where we're going to discuss some of these scenes that no matter how much time passes will always, no matter what, affect me. So stick around for some music, and then we'll be right back with you. If they gain another yard on us, I'm taking all of you out. But he's like, you make sure they remember forever the night they played the Titans. And man, that scene, if you want to get riled up for your day, maybe to start your day, or if you're going off to do something that you really need to be pumped up for, you go to that scene right there, and that will certainly get you pumped up. And another one, if you've seen or heard of the Disney movie Cool Runnings, that is based on a true story. We're kind of sticking with the true stories here for a moment, of the first Jamaican bobsled team. And it's a funny story. John Candy and a lot of other fun actors in there, and it's silly and kind of there. But that's another thing, about they were being looked down upon because of the nation that they came from, that there was no way that Jamaica should have been allowed to have a team in the Winter Olympics and so forth and so on. And so they have earned their way, obviously, and qualified, and they have continued on into the finals of this bobsled race, and sadly they end up crashing. So, but that's not the part that gets to me, because I mean that's sad, obviously, based on a true story that actually happened. but it's when they cut away and then they cut back to the lane, the I'm not sure what they're called, the chutes, or where they actually have the bobsled, and these four men are carrying the bobsled on their shoulders to the finish line. They had to finish the race. So that is another one that really is one that certainly is empowering, and you always got to finish the race, and that is always one that really gets to me. And then the final one, before I'll let you go for some more music, before our upcoming segments, this one is I was just talking with my family about this one the other day, of how absolutely powerful this one is. I've read the book, and this is a much older film, and I highly recommend this to everybody, literally everybody. I think would gather something from this movie. And the movie is To Kill a Mockingbird, and it was made, I believe, back in the 50s, I want to say. And it's set much earlier than that, but it's starring Gregory Peck as this lawyer defending an African-American defendant who was basically set up for a crime he did not commit. And obviously back then, segregation and things that were really, fighting against African-Americans was prevalent, and everything else. And there's a scene, one of the very last scenes of the movie. Sadly, they have lost the case. He was, set up the entire time, and Gregory Peck, Atticus Finch was the name of his lawyer character, and he had defended this man, till the ends of the earth, basically to try to gain his freedom, because he knew that it was not right what was happening to him. But sadly, they have lost the case, and in those days, the courtrooms were segregated. The lower floor were all white faces, and then the balcony, or the next level, were the African American groups and supporters of this unlawfully condemned man. And basically the story is told through the eyes of Atticus's daughter, Scout, and she's sitting up with the African American reverend and everything else, and they're up in the balcony, and Atticus is the last one in the main courtroom, and he's packing up his briefcase, and he begins to walk back towards them. They're up above him, but towards them, and to go out to the door. And the reverend turns to Scout and says this line, and I always take this line with me, and I'll leave you on this, and we'll go into maybe some little bit lighter things here in a bit. But he says to Scout, he says, "Stand up, your father's passing." And so the respect that he gave to Atticus and the situation, I think we could all certainly take something from that. So we're going to go on to a little bit lighter things. I'm going to get you all into some music, and then we'll be going into our next segment. We're going to be talking about we're still talking about time, of course, and we're going to be talking about misperceptions of time, and then we'll go into our future predictions, or not our future predictions, but I think some funny ones that we can all enjoy. But we're going to get you into some music, and then we'll be back with you in a few. Welcome back to Meticulously Ridiculous, if I can get out my own show's name there. Thanks for joining us on StudiOU on the TuneIn app this morning. As you know, that those of you that have been listening this morning, we are talking about time today. So we've been talking about memories and different things like that, and our perceptions of time. This next segment we're going to go into are about our misconceptions of time, or misperceptions of time, where we think, when we're younger, things seem so much different, or so much of a large, either age gap or long, so much time has been in between things, and stuff like that. So these are some interesting things when I was doing research for today's show that I thought were kind of interesting, that I had maybe misperceived, and things like that. So a lot of us are Fresh Prince of Bel-Air fans. You know, the show's been off the air for a while, but or at least making new ones on. It's still on the air. It comes on every day somewhere, I'm sure, because heavy syndication. But basically, I was seeing that Will Smith, who we know is okay. We're going to sidebar for a second because we know he's getting ready to play the genie in the upcoming live-action Aladdin, and we've had a first look at that. I'm very interested if any of you ever want to talk about our first, I guess, thoughts on that particular thing. Feel free to stop by, and we will certainly discuss. But Will Smith is now older than James Avery was at the beginning of Fresh Prince of Bel-Air. James Avery, we sadly lost a few years ago, but the man who played I almost said Dr. Phil. That's a completely different show. Uncle Phil, Will Smith is now actually older than James Avery was when James played Uncle Phil. So I thought that was kind of interesting how time goes. Now, we know maybe we don't quite have an ability to have our minds grasp, how much time, 100 years seems like a long time, and then 200 years certainly seems like a long time, and beyond. And then we really, can't maybe grasp beyond that. But I was also reading that the last Civil War widow, we know how long ago the Civil War was, but the last Civil War widow died in 2008. That does not make any sense to most of us, but basically she was not alive during the Civil War, but she was married when she obviously became of age to marry. She was married to a much, much older man who had fought for the Confederacy in the Civil War. And so I'm guessing he must have passed away long, long ago. But she actually did not pass away until 2008. She was the last Civil War Confederate widow, or the last Civil War widow, period. She was. So, and then I saw something extremely interesting about a certain year, the creation of several things were in this particular year. The year was 1889, and I was looking at some of them. I was like, okay, that is interesting, and that kind of and then one there's 4 different things that they have here in 1889. Obviously, probably a lot more things happened in 1889, but these 4 particular things. And the 4th one is what really kind of threw me for a loop. One is the erection of the Eiffel Tower. So them erecting the Eiffel Tower, that happened in 1889. The beginning of the Wall Street Journal began in 1889. The birth of Adolf Hitler, that's a dark one, obviously. But the one that really kind of threw me off, because we know this now as a technology company, Nintendo was actually founded in 1889. They began as a trading card company, because obviously there were not let alone TVs. There were, a lot of houses probably still did not even have electricity back then. And so Nintendo was actually created in 1889. I was kind of thrown off by that. But they began their business as a trading card company, and then obviously transitioned over the years into many other things. And then as we know them now as video games and other media players and things like that. So now this is going back a little ways, but if I say Karate Kid, the original Karate Kid, you're probably going to envision in your mind a picture of Mr. Miyagi. We all know a little Asian man who, white hair, white goatee, is really small in stature, and we, this wise old mentor to Daniel, and he was just, not ancient man, but he was quite a bit older. At least we thought he was quite a bit older. Actually, the actor Ralph Macchio, who played Daniel, is now older. In this year, in 2019, he is now older then Pat Morita, who played Mr. Miyagi. He's Ralph, the real name. Ralph is actually older now than Mr. Miyagi was, or Pat playing Mr. Miyagi was back in the original film. I thought that was kind of a mind bender as well, because we all think of Mr. Miyagi as, being probably in his 70s, maybe even 80s, the way that they depicted him. And so I thought that was extremely interesting. And this is something I did not know. I, not only like to entertain during my shows. Hopefully I've done at least a little bit of that today. But I also like to educate a little bit along the way as well. I did not know this. Now, this maybe not be news to a lot of you, because maybe you're much smarter than me or much more learned than I am. But actually, seconds are slowing down. I did not know this. I had don't recall this ever being mentioned to me before, but that's because the Earth's rotation is slowing down. So you would think with all of the ways that we have to tell time are going to be, messed up. I mean, if time really is slowing down, and maybe doesn't even, we're not just thinking it's slow in some instances, it actually is slowing down. But we actually have a thing that they've created called the leap second. I was unaware of this. I'd have heard of leap years, obviously, that comes around every 4 years, and we get an extra day in February because of it, that kind of thing. But there's actually a thing called a leap second, and that is how they continue to keep correct time, without screwing everything up, because time actually is slowing down because the Earth's rotation is actually slowing down. Now, something talking about Fresh Prince, something else that's been in syndication for forever. Basically, I don't think it's ever been off television. Is the Brady Bunch. My mom is probably, I'm sure, still is a huge Brady Bunch fan, and I remember being indoctrinated. What would be the word for that? I guess just encouraged maybe to watch the Brady Bunch, and I can say I'm a fan. I don't watch them all the time, but all six of the actors and actresses, or all six of the ones that played the children on the Brady Bunch, they are all still living. Sadly, the mother and father and the maid, Alice, have all passed, but all six of the kids, the actors who played the kids, are still living, but all six of them are now older than Ann B. Davis, who played Alice, was at the time of filming. You think that she was, again, kind of like the Mr. Miyagi thing, where she is quite a bit older, and, I think she was maybe only in her late 30s or early 40s when she portrayed Alice back then. So that's another one that now this is one that is pretty crazy too, because, again, in the same kind of mentor style, we can all picture the very first Star Wars, A New Hope. They added A New Hope later on, but it was originally Star Wars. But we can envision what Obi-Wan Kenobi looks like. He is an old, grizzled man. He's white beard, white hair, kind of broken down. Alec Guinness was the actor that portrayed Obi-Wan. And so we're thinking, again, in the Mr. Miyagi vein of this, wizened, just really kind of grizzled mentor figure. Well, actually, Mark Hamill, who played who plays, continuing, he was just in The Last Jedi, the newest in the episodes of Star Wars. Mark Hamill is now older than Alec Guinness was when they filmed the first Star Wars. So that is something that certainly throws you for a loop. So I'm going to get y'all with some music again. Then we'll go on to our some of these funny future predictions, and then I believe that will be the end of the show. And I thank y'all so much for joining us today. I hope you've enjoyed and maybe learned a little something along the way. But let me get you with some music, and we'll be back soon. Welcome back to StudiOU Voice of OU. I'm your host, Jason. This is Meticulously Ridiculous. In these last few minutes that we're going to have together this morning, there's always next week, though, of course, so don't dry your eyes. We're always going to be together again. But we have been talking about the perception of time or misconception of time and memories and good memories and things like that. But now in doing research for this show, I was looking at something that it kind of made me laugh. It actually made me laugh quite a bit. They were some future predictions from years past of things and the ways that people back then, whether they were researchers or famous people or things like that, that they just knew that by this time, or even by maybe not too far many years after they first made these predictions, that these things would have become true. We're in 2019. I always thought that we would have flying cars by now, but then I see a lot of the drivers here in Oklahoma, and I am very glad that we do not have flying cars, because that would create, I think, an even larger mess than normal. But these are some future predictions that now some of them have come to pass, because the years that they predicted these things to come into play by have passed. But these were future predictions back then. Again, sticking with the topic of time. But in 1905, a Popular Mechanics article predicted that a contraption called, and I love the word contraption, that's why I used it, called the electric handshake would allow a physician to examine a patient in another city. So you would not even have to be local to have yourself checked out by a physician. They were predicting that a thing called the electric handshake would be able to I guess check you out, to help you in anything that you were ailing from. And then I think this goes back in pop culture many years, but basically the prediction of having bases on the moon for people to live and stay. They have actually, research has shown that these predictions have actually gone back to the 17th century. And then from the early 50s here in the United States, every basically decade, more predictions have been made that, this is the decade that we're going to set up shop, as it were, on the moon. Like, we are going to have bases where people can leave our planet to go live and stay on the moon. And basically the last major one, that NASA themselves envisioned a completion of a permanent moon base by the year 2007. So I think that's coming past. And so we basically, I don't foresee us ever having a moon base, there. Now, this was a man by the name of Arthur C. Clarke. This was in 1966, and he's describing the year 2001. Now, I've already mentioned earlier in the show a scene from one of my favorite movies, Up, the Pixar movie Up. And so this kind of goes into a little bit relation to that. This is quoting him. Given a compact power source, the house of the future would have no roots tying it to the ground. Gone would be water pipes, drains, power lines. The autonomous home could therefore move or be moved to anywhere on Earth at the owner's whim. The time may come, therefore, when whole communities may migrate south in the winter or move to new lands whenever they feel the need for a change of scenery. Let's make this happen. I really like that. And I'm sure people in the upper Midwest and the ones that have been in that polar vortex these past few months could certainly love to have this. But I think that's something we should definitely make happen. Now, in 1949, experts, and I use that term loosely, of course, in regards to all of this, experts predicted that by the year 2000, so we are almost 20 years past, that women will be more than 6 feet tall. Obviously, there are women that are more than 6 feet tall, but I think it's saying that all women that will have been born after 1949, I guess, when these experts predicted this, they will be more than 6 feet tall, wear a size 11 shoe, have shoulders like a wrestler, and muscles like a truck driver. I mean, there are plenty of women athletes and plenty of women that have hit over 6 feet tall. but I don't think that relates to all of them. There's another one from 1955. He was the president of a vacuum company, and this was his prediction. Within 10 years of 1955, so by 1965, this was his prediction that nuclear-powered vacuum cleaners will probably be a reality in 10 years. I think we would have a whole mess of problems if we. I don't think the vacuum would be able to clean up what we would be losing in that. Now, in 1900, this was a prediction about the year 2000, another 2000 prediction, because as we know, the change in the millennium, people went crazy back with Y2K and all of that. But his name was John Elfreth Watkins, and he was an American civil engineer. And one of his predictions, he predicted that there will be no C, X, or Q in our everyday alphabet. They will be abandoned because they are unnecessary. I'm not sure where he came up with the idea that we would be losing letters. We add words every single year to Webster's dictionary, and so I don't think we're going to be losing any letters to help create those words. But that was a prediction that he had back then. So here is another one that I thought was pretty interesting, especially in our technology age. This was from Robert Metcalf. He's a co-inventor of Ethernet, and he's an MIT graduate. And this was in 1995. Almost all of the many predictions now being made about 1996 hinge on the Internet's continuing exponential growth. But I predict the Internet will soon go supernova, and in 1996 will catastrophically, I'm an Okie again, collapse. So he predicted a year after he made this prediction that the internet itself would collapse, but boy, was he wrong. Now, this one I think we could all get behind. I think there's a lot of animal lovers, hopefully a lot of you listening to this show right now. Basically, this was a prediction, and I think this has come to pass in probably some places. But basically, this was to find some use for every wild animal. So basically, domesticating more and more animals to stop the process of extinction, because obviously we have lost many species along the way here. But it's basically their prediction was putting animals to work an obvious solution to extinction. This was back in the 60s. They were going to have simian, aka monkey, manual laborers, chauffeurs, and kangaroo butlers were some of the more interesting ideas. And then basically they were predicting that there could be a use found for every single wild animal around to put them to work, so to not only stop extinction, but that way obviously humans would not have to do these jobs that they could have animals do. Pretty interesting. This was from the Decca DECA recording company back in 1962. This is a quote. "We don't like their sound, and guitar music is on the way out." They were talking about the Beatles. So I'm guessing that Decca Recording Company was not in a company for too much longer after that prediction. Now, the last one I'm going to hit you with here. These are all quotes from varying, like Fortune was one of them. These are all around 95, 96, 97. They seem to have two options. The first is to break itself up, selling the hardware side. The second is to sell the company outright. That was The Economist, 1995. As we know it, as we know it, they are cooked. It's so classic. It's so sad. That's a research analyst quoted in the New York Times in 1996. They went from hip to has-been in just 19 years. That's Business Week, 1996. By the time you read this story, the quirky cult company will end its wild ride as an independent enterprise. That was Fortune in 1996. They are already dead. That was Microsoft CTO in 1997. Admit it, you're out of the hardware game. Wired, 1997. And the last one, what would I do? I'd shut it down and give the money back to the shareholders. That was Michael Dell, the Dell CEO in 1997. I'm sure you've probably guessed who they were talking about. They were talking about Apple. So those were some crazy future predictions that they had back many years ago, and some a little bit more recent. So talking about time, it's crazy what we all think will have happened, and then of course we're surprised at things that do happen along the way. So that is my time segments, but I'm gonna hit you with a few announcements here because I have some good friends with the Union Programming Board, and I obviously always want to promote them. Everything is free that UPB puts on here in our lovely student union, the living room of campus. So this Friday, as we know, Meacham movies are free, all showings, and there are $1 concessions. But this week, on Friday at 6 p.m., 9 p.m., and midnight, there will be a showing of the Oscar-nominated film, The Green Book. So definitely check that out. And then also this Sunday, we have speaking of Academy Awards and Oscars, they will be airing on Sunday. And so UPB Film Series will be having an Oscar watch party right here in the Union in the Regents and Associates room beginning at 6:30. There'll be snacks and mocktails and chance to win prizes. So definitely, if you love movies like I do, you will join us on Sunday starting at 6:30. To enjoy the Oscars. And we know that the Oscars are super long show, so we definitely want to keep entertainment and keep you filled up with snacks and drinks. And so definitely join us for that. So most of my tens of listeners, as I call you, and I'm sure grateful for you, and I'm so happy that you have joined me once again, and hopefully we'll have you return next week. But my regular listeners know that every week I end the show with my segment called Touch of Gold. I'm a huge Jeff Goldblum fan, and I find that his wit and wisdom can certainly add something to our day and our week and our lives because he is a very wise man. And so I think I like to hit y'all with a touch of gold. But I was reflecting earlier on things from when I was younger and things that I still hold dear memories of. Again, relating it to time. So I'm going to have a guest touch of gold from a man from a show, and I still take a lot of his wisdom, and this is probably his best. This was the very last thing, one of the very last things he said on the show, Boy Meets World. Of course, I'm talking about Mr. Feeney, the professor, the teacher, the wise mentor on Boy Meets World. One of the last things he says to the main characters, he says, believe in yourselves, dream, try, do good.